The morning sun came through the tall windows of the Seoul Interstellar Embassy. It painted golden lines across the marble floor and made the crystal glasses on the long dining table shine like stars. Ambassador Park stood near the entrance, checking her reflection in a small mirror one last time. Her black hair was pulled back neatly. Her formal suit had no wrinkles. Everything had to be perfect today. 3 years. She had worked for 3 years to make this meeting happen. They were coming to Earth for the first time, and she was the one chosen to welcome them. It was the biggest moment of her life. They were a species from a distant part of the galaxy. They looked somewhat like large cats that walked on 2 legs. They had soft fur, pointed ears, and long tails. Their eyes were large and golden, and they could see in the dark better than any human. They were known across the galaxy for being proud, careful, and very slow to trust others. Had read every report about them. She knew their history, their customs, and their fears. They had survived something called the Scarcity Wars long ago. Resources had been limited on their home world, and they had fought each other for food and water for generations. This had taught them one simple lesson that they passed down to every new generation. Trust no one outside your own blood. Share nothing. Keep what is yours. It made them difficult to negotiate with, but was patient. Her assistant, a young man named Jin, walked up to her quickly. He was holding a tablet and looking nervous. Ambassador, the shuttle has landed. They will be here in 10 minutes. Nodded. Good. Is everything ready? Yes, the food has been prepared according to their dietary needs. The seating follows their protocol. We even adjusted the room temperature to match their preference. Jin paused, but there is one small problem. Felt her stomach tighten. What problem? Your sister called this morning. There was an emergency at her work. She had to drop off in here. Closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Was her 7-year-old nephew. Was her 5-year-old niece. They were wonderful children, but today was not the day for surprises. Where are they now? In the observation room, Jin said. I told them to stay there and be quiet. I gave them some coloring books. Looked toward the small room at the side of the dining hall. Through the glass wall, she could see 2 small figures sitting at a low table. Was drawing something with great focus. Was looking around the room with curious eyes. They need to stay there, said firmly. They are very protective of their young. Any unexpected interaction could cause problems. I understand, Jin said. I will keep an eye on them. Before could say more, the main doors of the embassy opened. 8 tall figures walked in, their footsteps soft and silent on the marble floor. They had arrived. At the front was Fleet Commander. She was taller than the others, with silver fur that seemed to glow in the morning light. Her eyes were the color of amber, and they moved constantly, studying everything in the room. Behind her walked 7 other delegates, all dressed in formal robes of deep blue and gold. But what caught attention were the 2 small figures walking between the adults. They were children, cubs. One was slightly taller, with light gray fur and nervous eyes. The other was smaller, with spots on her face and a tail that wrapped tightly around her own leg. They stayed very close to the adults, never looking up, never making a sound. Stepped forward and bowed respectfully. Commander, it is an honor to welcome you and your delegation to Earth. I am Ambassador Park. Studied her for a long moment before returning a small nod. Ambassador Park, the Council has sent us to observe your species and discuss possible cooperation. We will watch. We will listen. We will decide. Of course, said. Please, let us begin with breakfast. I hope you will find our hospitality acceptable. She led them to the long table. They sat down slowly, their movements careful and controlled. The 2 cubs were placed between their guardians, and they sat completely still, like small statues. Noticed that the cubs did not touch any of the food placed before them. They did not even look at it. They simply stared at the table with empty expressions. She leaned toward Jin and whispered, Why aren't the children eating? Jin checked his tablet. According to our research, cubs are trained from birth to only accept food from their direct blood relatives. They will not eat anything given by strangers. It is a survival behavior from their history. Felt a wave of sadness. The children looked so small and uncomfortable. She wanted to help them, but she knew she could not interfere. Commander began to speak about culture as they ate. She explained their beliefs, their values, and their expectations. "We teach our young that the universe is dangerous," said. "Resources are limited. Trust must be earned over many years, not given freely. This is how we have survived." Nodded politely. "I understand. Humans have a different approach, but we respect your traditions." "Different how?" asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "We teach our children that sharing creates more, not less. That helping others makes everyone stronger. That strangers can become friends." Made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a growl. A dangerous philosophy. Such openness invites betrayal. "Sometimes," admitted, "but it also invites connection, and connection has made humans stronger than we could ever be alone." The conversation continued but found her attention drifting. She looked toward the observation room again. Through the glass, she could see showing something too. He was pointing at his drawing and talking excitedly, though she could not hear his words. Laughed, covering her mouth with her small hands. Smiled. At least someone was having a good morning. She turned back to the delegation and tried to focus on the negotiations ahead. There was so much work to do, so many barriers to break down, so many fears to overcome. She had no idea that the real breakthrough would not come from diplomats and documents. It would come from children. And it would begin under the table. 40 minutes passed. The breakfast continued smoothly, or at least that was what thought. Commander spoke about trade routes and resource sharing agreements. The other delegates listened carefully, their large eyes moving between the humans at the table. Answered questions about Earth's governments, its resources, and its place in the galaxy. She was careful with every word. One wrong phrase could end these talks before they truly began. Jin stood near the wall, managing communications and keeping notes. He was good at his job, quiet and efficient, trusted him completely. But then she saw his face change. He looked at his tablet, then looked up at the observation room. His skin became pale. He walked quickly to side and leaned down to whisper in her ear. "Ambassador, we have a problem. The children are gone." His heart stopped for a moment. She looked at the observation room. The door was open. The coloring books were scattered on the small table, but N were not there. She tried to keep her face calm. She could not panic in front of the... "Find them," she whispered back, quietly. Jin nodded and moved toward the door. But before he could leave, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Where are End?" Commander had risen from her seat. Her amber eyes were wide, and her fur was standing up along her neck. She was looking at the two empty seats where the cubs had been sitting. The cubs were gone too. Everything happened very fast after that. The guards moved into action. They spread across the room, checking every corner, every shadow. Their movements were fast and silent, like hunting animals. Commander's claws extended from her fingertips, a sign that she was ready to fight if needed. "What have you done with our children?" she demanded, turning to face. Her voice was low and dangerous. "Commander, please remain calm," said, raising her hand slowly. "I am sure there is an explanation. Children wander, they explore. This is normal behavior." "Not for cubs," growled. "Our young do not wander. They do not leave their guardians. They are trained from birth to stay close, to stay silent, to stay safe." Another delegate, a female with dark brown fur, stepped forward. "If something has happened to them, this alliance is over before it begins." Felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. 4 children were missing. 2 species stood on the edge of conflict. Everything she had worked for was falling apart. "Jin," she called out, "status report." Jin was already on his communication device. Security is searching the building. All exits are sealed. No one has left the embassy since they arrived. Then they are still inside, said. She looked at. Commander, we will find your cubs, I give you my word. His eyes burned with anger and fear. Your word means nothing until I see my children safe. Understood. She was a diplomat, but she was also an aunt. If N were in danger, she would feel the same way. Let us search together, she offered. Your guards and my security team working as one, we will cover more ground. Hesitated. Trusting humans was difficult for her, but the need to find her cubs was stronger than her distrust. Fine, she said, but if this is a trick, you will regret it. The search began. They checked the hallways, the offices, the storage rooms. They looked behind doors and under desks. The embassy was large, with many places where small children could hide. Moved quickly through the building, calling out for N. Her voice echoed through empty corridors. Where are you? No answer. She felt sick with worry. What if something had really happened? What if someone had taken them? What if this entire breakfast had been a trap of some kind? No, she pushed the dark thoughts away. She had to focus. Jin caught up with her near the east wing. Ambassador, I have checked the gardens and the guest rooms. Nothing. Keep looking, said. They have to be somewhere. She returned to the main dining hall. Most of them had spread out to search, but Commander remained there, standing in the center of the room like a statue of grief. Her tail hung low, and her ears were flat against her head. I should never have brought them here, said quietly. I wanted them to see your world, to learn about other species, but I have put them in danger. Walked closer. We will find them. Children are curious. They hide in strange places. Cubs do not hide, replied. They obey, they follow the rules, and have never done anything unexpected in their lives. Her voice cracked slightly. That is how we raise them. That is how we keep them safe. Thought about her own nephew and niece. Was always asking questions, always wanting to see new things. Followed her brother everywhere, trusting him completely. They were not quiet or obedient. They were wild and curious and full of life. Maybe that was the difference between humans and... Jin returned to the dining hall, his face tired but determined. He walked around the edge of the room, checking behind curtains and under furniture. Then he stopped. He was near the great dining table, the massive wooden structure that could seat 40 people. He had dropped to his knees to look under it. And he froze. Ambassador, he called out softly. His voice sounded strange. You need to see this. Hurried over, followed, her claws still extended. They crouched down beside Jin and looked into the shadows beneath the table. And there, in the dim light, they saw something that neither of them expected. All 4 children were there. They sat in a small circle on the soft carpet, had his school backpack open in front of him. Inside was his lunch, a single kimbap roll that his mother had packed that morning, simple rice and vegetables wrapped in seaweed. He had broken it into 4 pieces. And the cubs were eating. The older one with gray fur held her piece carefully in both paws. She sniffed it, then took a small bite. Her eyes went wide. The smaller one with spots was already chewing. Her tail moved slowly back and forth, not in fear but in happiness. Sat next to them, humming a small song as she ate her own piece. She seemed completely comfortable, as if sitting under a table with alien children was the most normal thing in the world. Noticed the adults watching. He looked at his aunt and put a finger to his lips. He whispered, "They were scared. I told them it is okay. We are sharing." Could not speak. She felt tears forming in her eyes. Beside her, Commander made a sound that was part gasp, part sob. Her claws slowly retracted, and her whole body seemed to soften. "This is not possible," she whispered. But it was. It was right there in front of them. 4 children, 1 snack, and a moment that would change everything. Nobody moved, Nobody wanted to break the spell. Stayed on her knees beside the table, watching the 4 children in the shadows. Her heart was beating fast, but not from fear anymore. Something else filled her chest now, something warm and unexpected. Commander crouched beside her, her silver fur almost touching the ground. Her amber eyes were fixed on the 2 cubs as if she was seeing them for the first time. Under the table, continued to share his lunch. He broke off another small piece of kimbap and offered it to the smaller cub with spots on her face. "Here," he said softly, "you can have more, I am not very hungry." Looked at the food, then looked at. Her large eyes blinked slowly. Then she reached out with her small paw and took the piece. "Thank you," she said in a quiet voice. Her pronunciation was strange because she was still learning to speak through the translator, but the meaning was clear. Felt tears roll down her cheeks. She did not try to stop them. "How did this happen?" whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. "How did your children convince mine to eat from their hands?" Shook her head slowly. "I do not know. Children do not follow the same rules as adults." Jin was recording everything on his tablet. He understood that this moment was important. Historians would want to see it. Scientists would want to study it. But right now, it was just 4 children sitting on a carpet, sharing food, and not caring about the weight of the galaxy on their small shoulders. The older cub finished her piece of kimbap. She licked her paws clean and then looked at who was sitting cross-legged beside her. "What is this food called?" asked. "Kimbap," answered proudly. "My mommy makes it. It has rice and carrots and egg inside." "It is good," said. There was wonder in her voice, as if she had just discovered something amazing. Smiled widely. "I know mommy is the best cook." Reached into his backpack again and pulled out a small bottle of water. He opened it and held it out to the cubs. "Are you thirsty? You can share this too." Made a choking sound beside. She covered her mouth with one paw and turned away for a moment. Understood. This was breaking every rule they lived by. Their children were taught to never accept food or drink from strangers. They were taught that resources were precious and should be protected. They were taught that trust was dangerous. And yet here were drinking water from a human child's bottle and looking happier than had ever seen them. "This should not be possible," said again. Once refused food from her own uncle because he was not direct blood. Went hungry for 2 days rather than eat from a communal plate at a festival. They follow the rules. They always follow the rules. "Maybe," said gently, "some rules are meant to be broken." Looked at her with those burning amber eyes. For a moment, thought the commander might be angry, but instead, his expression softened into something like respect. "Your children did not force mine," said. "They did not trick them or threaten them. They simply offered." "That is what we teach them to do," replied. "When you see someone who is scared or hungry, you offer to help. Even if they are strangers. Especially if they are strangers, because strangers are just friends you have not met yet." Was silent for a long time. Under the table, the children had finished eating and were now playing some kind of game. Was showing the cubs how to make shadows on the wall using his hands. "Look," he said, curling his fingers in a specific way. "This is a dog." The shadow on the wall did look somewhat like a dog. Laughed, a high chirping sound that made everyone watching smile. "Now you try," encouraged. Held up her paws and tried to copy the shape. Her shadow looked more like a strange bird, but nodded enthusiastically. "Good job, that is very good." Clapped her hands. "Do a butterfly, do a butterfly." Adjusted his fingers and made a new shadow. The cubs watched with wide eyes. Jin leaned toward and whispered, "Should we bring them out? The other delegates are still searching the building." Thought about it. The children looked so peaceful, so comfortable with each other. She did not want to disturb them. "Send a message to the search teams," she said. "Tell them the children have been found and are safe. But do not bring anyone here yet. Let them have this moment." Jin nodded, and began typing on his tablet. Slowly sat down on the floor, no longer caring about her formal robes or her dignity as a fleet commander. She simply watched her cubs play with the human children, and something in her face changed. The hard lines softened. The tension left her shoulders. "When I was young," she said quietly, "my grandmother told me stories about the time before the scarcity wars. She said that once, long ago, they shared everything with everyone. We were open and trusting and happy." "What happened?" asked. "Resources became limited. Wars broke out. Millions died." His voice was heavy with old pain. "The survivors learned that trust was dangerous. They taught their children to protect themselves, to share with no one outside their bloodline, and we have followed those teachings ever since." "It kept you alive." "Yes, but I wonder sometimes if it truly let us live." Gestured toward the children under the table. "Look at them, and are happier right now than I have ever seen them. They are laughing, they are playing, they are sharing." "Children are resilient," said. "They can adapt to new ideas faster than adults. Perhaps that is why we protect them so carefully. We are afraid they will learn new ways, ways that we do not understand." Under the table was now telling a story. His voice was excited and dramatic. "And then the dinosaur roared really loud. Roar. And all the other dinosaurs ran away because they were scared. And listened with their full attention. Their ears were pointed forward, their eyes wide with fascination." "What is a dinosaur?" asked. "Big animals that lived on Earth a long time ago," explained. "They are all gone now, but they were really cool. Some of them could fly." "Animals that fly?" said, amazed. "Yes, and some had really long necks, and some had sharp teeth, and some had armor on their backs." The cubs looked at each other, then back at. "We want to see dinosaurs," said firmly. Laughed. "They do not exist anymore, but we have pictures and museums maybe you can visit sometime." "Can we?" Looked up at Commander with hopeful eyes. "Can we visit the museums?" Opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. She looked at helplessly. Smiled. "I think we can arrange that." And in that simple moment, something shifted between two species, not through treaties or negotiations or formal agreements, but through children and kimbap and dinosaur stories under a table. It was a small beginning, but small beginnings often lead to great things. The other delegates arrived one by one. They had been searching the embassy, their hearts filled with fear for the missing cubs. Now they gathered around the great dining table, looking down at the scene beneath it with expressions of complete shock. Nobody spoke at first, they simply watched. The children had created their own little world under the table, had taken off his jacket and spread it on the floor like a blanket, was braiding imaginary flowers into his fur, humming softly as she worked, was holding the empty kimbap wrapper, studying it like it was a precious treasure. One of the delegates, an elderly male named with graying fur and wise old eyes, lowered himself slowly to the floor. His joints cracked as he moved, but he did not seem to care. He needed to see this up close. "Commander," he said in a low voice, "is this real? Are my eyes deceiving me?" Shook her head. "It is real. I have been watching for nearly an hour now. Our cubs are playing with human children. They shared food. They are laughing together." Made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a cry. "In all my years, I never thought I would see this. Our cubs do not bond with outsiders. It is against their nature." "Perhaps," said softly, "it is not against their nature at all. Perhaps it is only against what we have taught them." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Another delegate, a young female named, stepped forward. Her orange fur was bright in the morning light, and her expression was troubled. "Commander, if word of this reaches the council, there will be questions. Some might say the humans have used some kind of technology to influence our cubs. A drug in the food, perhaps, or a sound frequency that affects their minds." Turned to look at her sharply. "Is that what you believe?" Hesitated. She looked at the children under the table, was now teaching how to move her ears, which of course did not work because human ears did not move. But both girls were giggling at the attempt. "No," admitted quietly. "I do not believe that, but others will ask." "Then we will tell them the truth," said firmly. "A human boy offered to share his food with frightened strangers. That is all. There was no trick, no technology, just simple kindness." Had been listening from nearby, giving the space to process what they were seeing. Now she stepped closer to Commander. "May I ask you something?" she said. Nodded. "Earlier you said that your cubs follow the rules, that they never do anything unexpected, but they did something unexpected today. They left the table and followed my nephew somewhere. Why do you think they did that?" Was silent for a long moment. She watched, who was now showing how to properly extend claws. The boy was fascinated, examining his own fingernails as if hoping they would do the same thing. "I do not know," finally admitted. "When we arrived and were nervous, this place was strange to them. The smells were different, the sounds were different, everything was unfamiliar. That must have been difficult for them." "Yes, I told them to be strong, to show no fear, to represent them with dignity." His voice became sad. "They tried so hard to be brave, but they are just children." Thought about and sitting alone in the observation room while the adults conducted their formal breakfast. She had told them to be quiet, to stay out of the way, but that was not fair to them either. "I think," said carefully, "that when children are scared they look for comfort, and sometimes they find it in unexpected places." "But why with your nephew? Why not with their own guardians?" "Because their guardians were busy being adults," replied gently, "and was just a child like them. He saw two other children who looked scared and lonely, and he did what children do, he made friends." Under the table was pulling something else from his backpack. It was a small notebook with pictures of dinosaurs on the cover. "Look," he said to the cubs, "this is my dinosaur book, I draw pictures in it, see, this is a T-Rex, he is my favorite." And crowded around him to look at the drawings, had clearly spent a lot of time on them. The dinosaurs were colorful and detailed, with big teeth and long tails. "Can you draw one for me?" asked. "Sure," flipped to a blank page and started sketching. His small hand moved quickly across the paper. Watched this exchange with moist eyes. He turned to. "Ambassador," he said, "in our oldest stories there are tales of a time when they were different. Before the scarcity wars changed us, we called it the time of open pause." "What was it like?" asked. "According to the stories, we shared freely with everyone. Resources, knowledge, even our homes. We welcomed strangers instead of fearing them. We trusted first and asked questions later." Paused. "Most believe these stories are myths, warnings against naivety." "What do you believe?" Looked back at the children. Was finishing his dinosaur drawing. It was a simple creature with a long neck and a friendly smile. He tore the page carefully from his notebook and handed it to. "For you," he said, "so you can remember the dinosaurs." Held the paper like it was made of gold. Her eyes were shining. Took a deep breath. "I believe the stories are memories, memories of who we used to be before fear changed us." "Do you think they could become that again?" "I did not think so until today," gestured at the scene before them. "But your children have shown me something I thought was impossible. Perhaps there is hope for us yet." The other delegates were gathering closer now, their initial shock turning into curiosity. Even, who had worried about what the council would say, had softened. She was watching try to teach the cubs a clapping game, their paws meeting her hands in awkward but joyful rhythm. Stood up slowly. Her formal composure was gone. In its place was something more honest, more real. "Ambassador Park," she said, "I came here expecting to negotiate trade agreements and military boundaries. I expected weeks of careful discussion before any trust was established between our species." "And now?" asked. Now I realize that trust cannot be negotiated. It can only be given. Looked down at the children, her amber eyes warm. Your nephew gave trust to my cubs without asking for anything in return. He saw strangers and treated them as friends. That is not something we can put in a treaty. No, agreed, it is not. But perhaps it is more valuable than any treaty we could sign. The two leaders stood in silence for a moment, watching the children play. The formal breakfast was completely forgotten. The carefully planned negotiations seemed unimportant now. Because something more important had happened. Something that could not be measured or documented. Something that lived in the hearts of children who did not know they were changing history. They were just sharing, just playing, just being kind. And that was enough. 2 hours passed, then 3. The formal breakfast was never finished. The carefully prepared food grew cold on the table. The diplomatic schedules were thrown away. Nobody cared. Instead, the adults arranged themselves around the edges of the great dining hall, sitting in chairs or on the floor, watching the children play. The delegates sat beside human embassy staff, and for the first time there was no tension between them. Jin had ordered more snacks from the kitchen. Fruit, crackers, small sandwiches. He placed them on a tray and slid it under the table for the children. More food is here, he announced. 4 small heads turned to look at the tray, then did something that made everyone watching hold their breath. He picked up an apple and offered it to first. You should eat more, he said. You are bigger, so you need more food. It was such a simple thing, such a natural thing for a human child to do, but it was extraordinary. They watched as took the apple without hesitation, without suspicion, without any of the careful checking that cubs were trained to do. She bit into it with a satisfying crunch. This is sweet, she said, surprised. Apples are the best, agreed, reaching for one herself. Chose a sandwich and studied it with curious eyes. She sniffed it carefully, then took a small bite. Her spotted face lit up with pleasure. What is inside this? She asked. Cheese and ham, explained. It is my second favorite food. Kimbap is first. I like this cheese and ham, declared. Sitting nearby with the other delegates shook his head slowly. I have seen many things in my long life, he said too, battles, treaties, the rise and fall of empires, but I have never seen anything like this. Nodded. She had removed her formal outer robe and was sitting cross-legged on the floor like a child herself. All her dignity and protocol had been set aside. When I was young, she said, my mother told me that the greatest danger in the galaxy was not weapons or wars. It was trust given too easily. And now asked. Now I wonder if the greatest danger is trust that is never given at all. Under the table had pulled out a new activity. It was a simple game called rock, paper, scissors. He was teaching the rules to the cubs. Rock beats scissors. Scissors beats paper. Paper beats rock. Understand? Nodded seriously, concentrating hard. Okay, ready, rock, paper, scissors. Go. Through paper, through rock, cheered. I win, paper covers rock. Looked at her paw as if it had betrayed her. I want to try again. They played several more rounds, sometimes one, and joined in, their small hands and paws moving in the simple rhythm of the game. Watched her nephew with pride, was not doing anything special. He was just being himself, being kind, being open, being human. Maybe that was the most special thing of all. The young delegate with orange fur approached hesitantly. Ambassador, she said, I must apologize. For what? Earlier, I suggested that perhaps your people had used technology to influence our cubs. It was wrong of me to think that. I was looking for an explanation that fit my understanding of the universe, but the truth is simpler. What truth is that? Watch the children playing under the table. Your children are raised differently than ours. They are taught to share, to trust, to welcome strangers. We are taught the opposite. We learn from birth that the universe is dangerous and that others cannot be trusted. Both teachings come from a place of love, said gently. Your ancestors wanted to protect future generations from the pain they experienced. Yes, but in protecting us from pain, they also protected us from joy. His voice trembled slightly. I do not remember the last time I saw a child laugh like is laughing right now. Placed a hand on his arm. It is not too late to learn new ways. Under the table, the game had changed. Now and we're teaching the human children a game. It involved complex movements of the tail, which was a problem because humans did not have tails. You have to move your tail like this, demonstrated, her gray tail sweeping in a specific pattern. Looked behind himself as if expecting a tail to appear. When nothing happened, he laughed. I do not have a tail, he said, but maybe I can use my arm. He stood up and moved his arm behind his back, waving it in what he thought was a similar pattern. The effect was ridiculous, and all 4 children burst into laughter. That looks so silly, giggled. Your turn, encouraged. Jumped up and tried her own version, wiggling her whole body in an enthusiastic but completely wrong way. More laughter filled the space under the table. Watched this scene with tears in her eyes. She did not try to hide them. They are teaching each other, she said softly. Not just your children teaching mine, but mine teaching yours. It goes both ways. That is how friendship works, replied. Was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. When I return to my home world, I will have to make a report to the High Council. They will want to know everything about this mission. They will want to know about human technology, resources, military strength. What will you tell them? I will tell them the truth, that humans are loud and emotional and confusing, smiled slightly, and that they raise their children to share their last piece of food with strangers. By noon, the children were tired. They had played every game they knew, shared every snack, and told every story. Now they lay in a pile under the table, their bodies tangled together without any thought of species or boundaries. His arm was wrapped protectively around. His tail was curled around his ankle. They breathed softly in the rhythm of sleep. The empty kimbap wrapper still sat in the center of their circle, just a simple piece of packaging, but to everyone watching it meant so much more. Jin approached quietly. Ambassador, should we wake them? The delegation was scheduled to tour the city this afternoon. Shook her head. Let them sleep, the city will still be there tomorrow. Heard this exchange and nodded in agreement. My delegates can wait. This moment is more valuable than any tour. And so they waited, adults from 2 species sitting together in silence, watching children dream. Outside, the sun continued to rise. The city went about its business. The galaxy spun on as it always had. But inside the Seoul Interstellar Embassy, something new was beginning. Something built not on treaties or negotiations or formal agreements. Something built on a single kimbap roll, shared freely, without expecting anything in return. And when the children finally woke, stretching and yawning and looking around with sleepy eyes, both species knew that the universe had changed. It was a small change, barely noticeable in the grand scale of things. But small changes have a way of growing.